Hello, I hope this finds you doing well. My name is Thomas Stott. I'm with Elevation Wellness, giving you a lecture today on how to best support your zebra or your zebras. As you see in this picture, my three zebras. We have Dr. Patty, who normally joins us through these lecture series or podcasts, and then you have our 6-year-old son standing directly in front of her, and our almost 8-year-old daughter standing on his right there. So those are my zebras. And I wanted to put this together kind of to the surprise of Dr. Patty without her knowing, because I wanted to be authentic as best as possible to myself. So I have a way about going about things in which I try to think bigger picture and how can I best truly support an individual in Dr. Patty that is remarkably talented and intellectually based and innovative in her approach to everything, but how do I support her? What does she find out of me? I want to do so without any influence from her. So I'm going to put this together and show her afterwards here. All right, so I think support really starts with our societal norms. And at least in America in 2019, I've noticed that we have a lack of what I feel is a true sense of community. Thinking about the neighborhood I grew up with, around me at all times, if my parents were ever late getting home to work, I'd be shuttled over to a friend's house for dinner to be taken care of. They know that their parents kind of have their back. And though we've made some strides to find our own little niche here and there, it's just not where we're at in America these days. People are working 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet. Kids are being shuttled back and forth. Parents are always working, and there's not much time to make connection to therefore evoke this sense of community. And I think that's got us in quite a bit of trouble because it's left us as a bunch of individuals trying to realize what we want to try and strive for is true health, whereas this interconnectedness, making connection, true human connection with another individual is part of the health, part of the human experience. So I think it's just very difficult. And I think it's made us inherently selfish with our time because we don't have a lot of it. We feel like we don't have any time to ourselves. So how can we be of service to others? What can we do? And it backs you into this corner because if you get down to that route and you rely solely on yourself, when it's time for you to reach out for help, 1, you'll be really bad at it. 2, you probably won't know how. And 3, you probably won't want to reach out for help. And I speak from personal experience trying to do every single thing on my own because I think that, this will demonstrate how hard I am, how I have my stuff together. But really, we've been programmed to take care of ourselves with no help. That this notion even of asking for help demonstrates a weakness. And I'm really glad to see that depression's being talked about more between people and that individuals are unplugging from social media and from distractions to take time out for themselves, but it's still not mainstream. There's still this underlying question of, like, oh man, they had to back out of this or that. Why don't they have their poop together? It's still that underlying thought that's prevalent in the societal norms. And I have this newsflash that nobody has it together. You take the cleanest looking person with the best grades in school, the best job, the seamless relationships, everybody loves them, and he or she deals with depression just like everybody else. He or she has difficulty at any given time with GI issues, with food phobias, with inner demons. We all face it. Nobody has it all figured out. I don't have it figured out, and I would step out on a limb not too far to say that those of you listening don't have it figured out. But what I wanted to do was put this together for those of you that live with zebras that are really struggling, zebras that are really fighting hard to figure out their bodies and how to best make it through this life with any sense of feeling good about themselves. Because it gets to the point where a zebra starts to feel crazy. And if they don't have people on their side and people supporting them, it might outwardly look like they're going crazy. But when we look at our zebras, we can call them the canaries in the mine shafts. The canaries that used to be taken down to the mine shafts to see if it was sustainable air for the mine shaft workers to breathe. It's kind of what these zebras are in our lives. They're very sensitive to changes in stress levels, to environmental changes, but their whole lives they've been told they're crazy. Not just by physicians, psychiatrists, psychologists, other family members, but by everybody in some capacity. You talk to any zebra and ask them if they've heard the word, right? So weird. Like, oh, that's weird. And they're just going to start laughing because they're going to come back and saying, I was always that weird kid. I went to the doctor to talk about something. Oh, that's weird. No explanation, kind of excused and sent out the door. So they're never explained really why something's going on. No offense to the physicians, as they legitimately don't know. But to walk around your whole life with no explanation is very difficult. We need to understand that our zebras are not crazy. They're just that sensitive to change. Yes, to physical barometric pressure change, to pollutants, to smoke, smog, any type of allergen, mold. You walk into a room at an Airbnb that you're staying and your zebra says, I think there's some mold or something here. It's triggering a flare. Your first step, your first thought has to be in support. You have to respect their ability to use their nose or whatever senses they feel are flaring up to detect these things. Where you're otherwise, this room smells fine to me, I don't see an issue here. What you don't want to do is meet that person with confrontation. You need to respect the fact that they can perceive these things and then figure out an action plan. It's not going to get you anywhere good to say, no, you don't smell anything. No, you don't feel this way, because they do. And they're trusting you enough to be able to voice that opinion. How to make someone feel comfortable then is it starts with listening. You need to be able to listen to them and hear. So I came up with this acronym. You need to help them feel loved. And I know that seems a little woo-woo right off the bat, but make them understand that you're there in support and for them. That you're going to listen to them first, and you'll make them feel like you're not butting up heads against them. We need to ease their worried mind. So, yes, you walk into a room somewhere, it smells like mold, it's going to trigger this flare, maybe it raises anxiety levels a little bit. Hey, don't worry, we're going to get this taken care of. Or go ahead and worry, but go through some breathing, find a technique in which you can help deter some of that stress level. Rising sensation, and say, hey, we're going to work to get this fixed. This is going to be a lesson we've learned. Next time we'll need to make sure that there's not been any recent water damage, or we'll call ahead or take the necessary steps. And then assessing the situation for a chance to help. All right, so you figured out now that you need to move rooms. What else can I do for you right now that would help you out? Well, it'd be helpful to get you out of this room. All right, well, let me get you over here. Let me take care of a couple bags while we go up front and talk. There's always a chance to help. And then we need to react slowly to every situation. And this kind of governs your reaction to anything that comes about. And I'll speak from personal experience here. As a male that's used to fixing things and by hormone level, and growing up wasn't the best listener, right? I heard a lot of things, but as soon as I was told something, my listening and hearing side kind of shut down, and I went straight to, all right, well, this person has a problem, they start fixing it. And I honestly stopped listening to people, and I was in my own head drafting up a series of solutions for the issue when all I needed to really be was present for the individual, present for Dr. Patty in this case, and just be able to hear what she was saying, to allow her to voice complaints or reactions to certain situations, and then move on from there. But you need to react slowly. You need to try and avoid becoming defensive, right? Nothing that your zebra's doing is a personal attack on you, or if you're the one that made the reservation and they're really frustrated, we'll stay with this Airbnb example, right? If you're the one who made the reservation, you can't take this personally. It's not something that you're not being attacked because you chose the wrong room or did the wrong thing. A lot of times your zebras will react to situational frustrations, and you have to understand that those are situationally dependent and are not personal attacks on you. That's a tough pill. It was for me for quite some time to swallow until I did so. And talking about reactions to things. This is from Dr. Patty's presentation, Understanding Physical Limitations with EDS. And I really like the graphic because it'll give you a better understanding of, you're wondering, you're like, man, when I marry this individual, he or she seemed to have their stuff together, right? Just like you thought, when you thought everybody had their stuff figured out. But now they seem so sensitive to disruption. What's going on with them systemically? All right, so take that red line with the caution triangle next to it as not necessarily a pain line or reaction line. Think of it as an alarm line. All right, so you follow the line graph now for the individual in blue. So perhaps this is your zebra before, life got really busy and stress levels went up, and before you had kids and the body was a little bit more malleable to change and adaptation. So following that blue line, say a big stress trigger comes up and it shoots you up over the alarm line. So following the blue line, you get shot way high up. Maybe it's an acute travel stress, your luggage got lost, and included was your passport. And now there's a stress bell. Well, the way the body is set up to come back down in this autonomic nervous system response, this fight or flight, is when the fight bells go off, you need something to bring you back down. And the body becomes really accustomed to bringing you back down out of these fight patterns, so it slowly works you back under that alarm line. Hey, we're called ahead, we're going to find the luggage, it's going to be shipped here, we're going to give you a voucher for a couple $100s to buy clothes for right now. I'm just making up a story. But that line, following that blue line, eventually dips back under the alarm line. And as you look at it moving further out along the path to the right there, it makes its way back to its baseline. So you're now a couple days into your vacation, you're waiting for your bags to come back, and you're right there. Well, take a zebra that has gone through a significant amount of life change and their system's been compromised to the point now where the autonomic nervous system isn't as good as it once was at buffering that sympathetic parasympathetic response, where it can't attenuate for those stress levels to get you back down. So follow the green line, where same acute travel stress, bags get lost, passport get lost, a lot of stress, right? So now instead of dipping back down after a couple days, there's this constant state of worry and stress where, look at that green line, it hovers now right below that alarm state, where anything can kind of trigger. You throw in other things that get associated with travel, maybe getting lost, maybe being late for something. And now imagine that green line where it's hovering right below that red line, spiking up over it throughout your trip. And that's when you can kind of see, all right, this makes sense with, I remember traveling with my husband or my wife, my significant other, whoever, before, and they used to have all this anxiety around everything, every place we go or everything we do, but now it seems to be prevalent, and hopefully that graphic paints a little bit bigger picture. That fine line, as Dr. Patty has alluded to, can cause pain, fatigue, or inflammation. It can contribute to like a pro-inflammatory state in the body, triggering a myriad of other autonomic or systemic responses. We can definitely work on lowering that baseline to get it back down towards that blue line, right? Closer towards something where it's not just waiting for that next boom trigger to cause a complete flare up and body shutdown, but it definitely takes some work. So the action plan, all right, moving on to what do I do? Well, it starts with listening techniques, and I picked these up in a marriage coaching class with Dr. Patty before we got married, so this is in 2009. But it allows, in this technique, in this one pattern, it allows the zebra to voice themselves and really gives them a chance for you to ask, what do you need from me? Now, as soon as you ask that question, you need to make sure you understand what's going on. So there's a little back and forth that our marriage coach worked with us, and it goes something like this. You ask your zebra what you need from me. You respond back so that I understand you. What I heard you say was, and then verbatim as best as possible, you just repeat back. Perhaps you paraphrase it if it was a lot. You want to demonstrate and show understanding. You need to do this because we're so reactionary to speak back. And once again, to my own fault, I should have been on debate team in high school because I was all ready to fire back with something defensive. I was very defensive in my earlier stages of life with just about everything, right? But you need to make sure that you're not just speaking just to speak, that you're hearing somebody and they're comprehending. And one way you can verify this is by having this back and forth. And I know it seems tedious and kind of silly, but the two of you can go back and forth so that I understand you, what I heard from you say was, and then repeat back what they say, and then you can offer a thought. It also forces you not to be reactionary or too quick-witted to come back with something that's going to be inhibiting of the process of healing. Little woo-woo here again on the third point is that everything and everybody is connected. So we cannot underestimate that interconnectedness and the power of healing. And this is really about our support network. If you have a lot of negative energy around you, whether it's your family, whether it's his or her family, whether it's a circle of friends, or that one friend that you're like, man, that friend is just emotionally draining every time I hang around them, that we might need to trim that back. This might mean taking a break from a friendship for a short amount of time while you figure something out, or a family member, which can be a difficult conversation to have. But we need to recognize that setting an action plan up with you and with your zebra is paramount in giving you something in which you feel like you'll make progress with and not just end up hitting a baseline, because this stuff takes a lot of work, as we'll talk about in a moment. There's so much work, there's so many different things and aspects to unpack that if you're surrounded by negative energy, it's gonna hold you down and hold you back. As I alluded to, chronic disease takes work. And unfortunately, most journeys in health and wellness start from pretty dark places. There aren't many people that, there's just such a soft line of people that are feeling really miserable about life, but they haven't found rock bottom. They haven't hit that place of despair. And it's just enough of a feeling of being miserable that it's not enough to make them change. And it's just, they accept it. So there's a group of people, and a quite a large group, that ends up going through life generally not happy, but kind of in this place where they feel like they cannot become happy because they're not ready to take those steps. But a lot of times people that are ready and willing to take these steps are pretty deep in the hole. They've hit a place where something needs to change, or something really bad is feeling like it's going to happen for them. So understanding that people that come in, your zebra that confronts you and says that they want to change some big things, we need to really respect that, because one, it takes a lot of courage to talk about that type of change, and secondarily, it takes a whole lot of motivation in dealing with a chronic disease. And I cannot speak from personal experience, but watching Dr. Patty, having known her for nearly 20 years and being a big part of her life for a good number of these years, there's so much work, and to motivate yourself to work on something that's absolutely taxing and draining you every day I cannot imagine. But to deal with something like EDS, there needs to be a good amount of maintenance work. How you can help facilitate this for your zebra is you need to allow time for self-care. So your zebra might need to go to the gym. If they don't have a gym membership, they might need to get one, because a lot of times getting out of the house and getting going, that's just as important, developing that routine, as the actual aerobic or light, weight work that they end up doing, is finding this time away. Because going back to those societal norms, we have it programmed in our heads that if you take time out for yourself, as a mom, as a dad, as a caretaker, that's selfish. When it couldn't be further from that. There's this thought that you really can't help somebody else if you can't, how can you love if you don't love yourself? How can you help somebody else if you can't truly help yourself? Is that you need to have time for self-care, for recovery time, Is it a massage? Is it time to soak in an Epsom salt bath? All these will be part of what we'll talk about, which is finding an algorithm, a plan in which something comes up. You have an action plan, a way to go about dealing with it. But we have to allow the zebra to get into this state. We have to be encouraging enough to say, no, I'm going to watch the kids. You really need to go. I know there's 1,000 things to do, but you have to go to take care of yourself. And sometimes that involves pushing them out the door to go. Moving beyond maintenance work, it can definitely be done. It's something that seems like, a never-ending, daunting task that if we have trouble enough just maintaining where we're at, how can we ever really move beyond? But we want progress to be slow, but understand that with slow progress, we can see a return to a former self. But if we're not switching things up and doing things to not just get by, but to get better, it's going to be very difficult to find that motivation to keep going. People need to see results, but we can certainly reestablish a new baseline. It's just going to take time. It's going to take repetition and a whole lot of support from us, because that road is going to be ridden with frustration. There are going to be daily, weekly, monthly setbacks. Something's going to happen. It's going to come up. We know life is going to get in the way. We need to learn from it and then quickly forget about it so that we don't fester in the frustrations of, when you have that friend at work or perhaps friend at home that you're hanging out with, they tell you the frustrating story of what happened to them that day, and you're like, I'll allow this person to vent. And then you're still with the person and your other friend joins up. And then this person jumps into the same exact story with you right there. And you're like, maybe they need to vent to somebody else too. I get it. But they already did it to me and now I'm hearing it again. And then somebody else comes up and soon they're telling the same story to that third person. At that point, they're just festering in, it could be an intention thing. There are a number of things that it could be, but they're just festering in the frustrations of how that set them back. And it's almost like a woe is me mentality where, look, it happened. We need to move on. Figure out, how it happened. Was it actionable? Is there something I could have done to avoid it? Yes, no, maybe. So check that box, figure it out, and move on. I like explaining it this way, that we don't want to take baby steps in thinking about health and wellness and change. We want to think about crawling. And I like the word crawling, the visual analogy too, because, there are some speedy crawling babies out there, but there are some fast moving baby steps. Kids taking baby steps are flying across the room sometimes. And you're thinking about initially crawling, just barely getting those legs underneath you. But that's how slow. Remember, we want progression to occur, but we want it to be slow. We want it to be very gradual. Think tortoise in the hare, very much in the quarter of the tortoise. But finding the road, a path, this journey to health and wellness and to reestablishing a new baseline to that person you once knew, is we can only really address one thing first. It could be a modification to diet. And again, this is only choosing one thing within diet now, because that's a whole nother can of worms to work on. Maybe it's making a switch from dairy milk, so cow's milk in your cereal every morning or in your coffee, to a nut-based milk, a plant-based milk, something to reduce inflammatory level. But just changing that one thing, not completely knocking out a food category, just making one, I drink this every day. I'm going to try and make this one switch and see how I feel. It could be a change in activity level. So whether it's adding in, we're going to make sure that once in the morning, we're going to get out and walk the dogs together. So even if we're not talkative at that point, we can go for a little 5 or 10 minute walk to establish a routine. And then after dinner, we'll go for a little postprandial meal to help with digestion. But once again, just 5 or 10 minutes. If we're going to add in some aerobic activity, we want it to be very subtle and only choosing one thing, so not going in crazy. We see that all too often, is that it takes weeks for your body to realize that it's being overtrained. Weeks. Because your heart, it doesn't say, hey, I'm really sore today, like your bicep would scream at you if you did a big workout the day before. And for the zebra, it's going to be hard for him or her to really judge where they're at because they might feel chronically fatigued. So it's very difficult to gauge where we're at and what we need to do differently. So we want change to be very gradual. It could be the addition of a guided meditation practice. Again, this is something we'd only want to do in a real short, small format first, in something that's very obtainable, maybe 2 to 3 times a week. And after you find yourself on this path, you want to keep crawling. All too often, I just mentioned, we see people go full throttle. They're like, I did one thing for a week and I was feeling great, so now I'm doing all the things. And it's something that you need to be able to govern your zebra at times and say, hey, look, I think we need to take it slow. We're on a good track. We've seen some progress. We're moving in the right direction, but we need to make sure that we don't go overboard here. So start crawling and keep crawling. And accepting that slow progression, that crawling and keep crawling, that's going to be a tough pill for a lot of zebras to swallow. But you need to be there by their side. I mean, the individual is going to be thinking back to life as a teenager, as an early 20-something, and wanting those days back. And the body just changes so much. I take this snapshot of Dr. Patty's life as a young 20-something, and it's almost comical. I mean, working a high-stress job. It was a great job in physical therapy, but so busy, 10 to 12 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week, working some Saturdays, training at a very high level in martial arts 2 to 3 hours a day at 6 days a week. I mean, we see her down here on the DC National Mall with a Kicking for Kids event, throwing a jumping kick and a beautiful axe kick, and then also maintaining an active weekend social nightlife where not a lot of sleep is happening. And I just think back, I'm like, what could go wrong? I mean, it's comical in the saddest of ways, right? A tragedy of some sorts, because it's just waiting, this ticking time bomb of all these other stress markers to come in, whether it's a change in job, whether it's the addition of a family through biological or adoptive means. But so much happens throughout, especially those teenage 20s, 30s years, that I mean, it really is not fair for anybody to go through without having this toolbox of things to reach into and the support network for how to navigate those waters, but especially for somebody dealing with a chronic illness. And something like EDS that carries a myriad of other autoimmune or autoimmune seeming disorders. I mean, it makes it almost unnavigatable waters that you can't we can't even swim through, because there's so much change that happens. And we just need to do our best to recognize, hey, this is where this person came from, and this is where they're trying to get back to. How can I be, that support system and that life raft, that life preserver at times, right, to get them through the storm? So, a list here that's by no means completely comprehensive. I mean, you see my cop out at the bottom there with life is my version of etc., right? But things that can affect a zebra and really put a halt in progress that seems to be going their ways, in addition to the family, which could come, if it's biological addition, through some very drastic hormonal disturbances. We could find stress, either familial stress, could be within the nuclear family or extended family or in-laws, whatever the case, stress at work. It could be self-imposed stress. Now, we all know people that are very hard on themselves. We call them perfectionists. You call them people that just seem to worry a bunch and really strive for doing everything as best as they can. Do they not know how to mitigate that stress once it gets to the point where it seems like life is kind of collapsing down on top of them? It's somebody seems to have their stuff together until the world dumps on them, and then it becomes very difficult to handle. As I mentioned before, negative energy. So is it a relationship in any of those? Is it familial or work or friend circle, where you might need to take a break from somebody for a little while, or just cut off ties, or say, hey, you know what? There's a lot that I'm dealing with right now. I'm going to reach out to you in a couple weeks when I have things figured out. Now, I put this on here, and this is arguably number one. is that just basic activities of daily living. So I'm talking laundry, cooking, cleaning, things that we all assume roles of, especially if you're in a relationship with your zebra where you're like, hey, I do this list of things and my zebra does this list. There are some days where you're going to really need to step up or find a way to mitigate those tasks because your zebra's going to be close to down and out just getting through those activities of daily living. So we need to understand that it doesn't have to seem like a lot for you for it to be like the weight on their shoulders for your zebra. It could be travel itself. You might thinking, oh, we're going on this vacation, we're going to get away, we'll have a break from everything. You can have the travel itself being the cause of quite the acute dysautonomic flare, for example. So we have to realize that this reptilian brain of ours, it's fight or flight with everything we come into contact with. Sending it 30,000 feet up in the air for 5 hours to come back down, and that's a nonstop flight, right? Not doing that a couple times. There's nothing natural about that for anybody. Put that in conjunction with somebody with dysautonomia, with issues at dealing and handling change, and you could be butting them up against the wall. Certainly with weather, so this could be the incoming storm, a change in barometric pressure. Humidity is a big source of dysautonomic flares that could occur. This could be a combination of travel from a dry climate to climate that has more moisture in the air, so combining those two things. Any type of interruption to the daily flow. So routines are good for just about every human, right? Take a zebra's flow and they start to find their algorithm that we'll talk about in a second of what's working and what's helping to align those, and then add a big disruption, a call home from school that your child has slipped and busted their nose or cut their eyebrow significantly and now they need stitches. Well, that's a huge disruption. It's going to come with more stressors. And then I mentioned just life in general getting in the way of things you're trying to otherwise make a positive impact on. Okay, so finding that algorithm, what I keep mentioning in previous slides is finding that really equation that sets you on the path for success with you and for your zebra. And what we need to do is on any given day, we need to start by defining or redefining what's too much. So what am I able to mitigate for that I don't want to make sure that I send this person, or if I'm the zebra himself, that I'm sending myself into a flare. And I come up with these 3 P's. So planning, we need to know the triggers. So if we know that when my mother comes over, it sends me into a mast cell flare up because she just starts critiquing the way my house is or how I'm parenting my child. I'm just making this up. Mom, if you're listening to this, you're great on that behalf. But knowing the triggers, something that happens at work, we need to know the physical triggers so that we can plan for them and then predict. We need to know the resultant effects. So if we know, for example, that by the end of the work week, I'm highly stressed out, I'm trashed, or this is probably a better example to use my zebra for, right? So if I know that my zebra is done by about Thursday, Friday night, maybe I need to make sure that we plan to have meals already set up. Regardless of who is doing the cooking in the relationship or if it's shared, we know that by Thursday and Friday, we either have a meal that we're able to have cooked and meal prepped, or like a frozen soup from before that we've prepped out of the freezer, or perhaps we go out and pick some food up on a Friday. So planning and then being able to predict, because I know once we get to Thursday, if we don't have something on the menu, we're just going out and getting trashy food because it's comforting, right? There's that initial feel-good sensation from eating something that's very satiating. But we need to know that could trigger a whole nother myriad of effects as well. And then being proactive. So really having an out is what I called it. Making sure that, all right, I know this is coming up. I know what this is going to result in. So boom, I'm going to have this planned out. And then the last one is accepting failure. And I mean this in the most positive of ways. As we know, failure is right? It has a very big negative kind of connectivity to it. Nobody wants to fail. But I really like this Samuel Beckett, this Irish novelist, his quote, which is, "Ever tried, ever failed? No matter, try again, fail better." And that kind of stuck with me as somebody that's very self-critical. I'm very hard on myself because we have to understand that it's all a chance for learning. And if you tried to plan, predict, and be proactive as best as you can, and you felt like you didn't do a good job, hopefully you learn from it. Hopefully when you try it again, you'll fail a little bit better, right? Everybody searches for perfection in everything we do, and I don't know if there is such a thing. Perhaps we go through life just failing, time and time again after the other, until you think about a sport like rock climbing, where, some of the best climbers in the world that climb these ridiculous routes will spend their time, accumulate like hundreds of hours trying to solve this one route, and they'll get it one time. So that so much failure is unparamount. It's so overwhelming compared to that one success. But being able to be okay with that and understand that you're working through it is where I'm getting at, and understanding that you're doing the right thing by staying the course. So I brought this up in the previous slide, and it was pretty much a direct reflection of ourselves. These meals that consist of cheesy fries, wine, and then ice cream sundaes afterwards. That should not always, and I guess I could put some parentheses around that, right, be part of the equation. So that might be a failed algorithm night of ending up like that. So what do we want to do if we feel like we're going close to that as a reward for making it through a really tough day? What we want to do is flip that around and say, you know what, this day sucks. Nobody feels good. Your zebra feels like a pile of turd, and you're not feeling great either, and you're exhausted. What we want to do, instead of going to that meal that I wrote out there, is to do something to set things back on track, as we need to reestablish that algorithm. So what can you do right now? Taking a page out of living in the present, forgetting the past. Right now, what can you do? And actually, personal experience today, I woke up feeling under the weather, and there's no reason I should, and I've been doing things the right way, and I was pretty pissed for about the first 45 minutes feeling this come on, until I typed out a quote about living in the present for our Instagram feed, and I decided that I couldn't, wholeheartedly post that and believe in that if I wasn't practicing that. So I decided to put a different mental attitude, mindset in, and I started doing, all right, I don't feel good. What can I do now to help myself? Whether it's, I didn't draw the warm bath, but I'm going to make sure I nail my sleep pattern tonight. Whether it's taking a nap for you or your zebra, prepare a favorite realigning meal. Perhaps there's a really good salad that you just love, but the ingredients are a little bit pricey, but it's still cheaper than going out and binging on the things that I wrote there. So you go out and pick that stuff up for he or she. You need to understand that the day might be lost. So, man, I've just given up on today. It's not worth it. But the journey is not just today. It's one of many steps, and today's only one. Do yourself a favor by setting yourself up better for tomorrow. I wanted to put this in there because it ends up being a phrase that comes up in our house every week, or about every 2 weeks, is that some days that day is just lost. And instead of being able to set up for success, you're in complete management mode. It's like the sirens are going off and you're just in keep the house together. So some days for your zebra, you'll need to manage what we call a horizontal day. So a zebra needing to go horizontal, this might result in a nap on the couch. It might be spending a few hours reading or simply talking to you from a sideline position. This could be the direct result or the start of a dysautonomia flare. And what you need to do, if this seems kind of acute, like, hey, you were all right, and 30 minutes later, now we're kind of in this situation, is document what you've done recently to help get back into that, being able to predict in the future what the needs of your zebra are. So is it something related to gastric dumping or some type of dysautonomia response from food recently? All right, like what did we eat? This could even be 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2, 3 hours ago. but start writing some things down. Oh, well, yesterday, all right, I'm starting to see the puzzle pieces getting put together here. Yesterday, we were out at a baseball game. It was really hot and humid. We didn't go out and drink a lot, but we were out with friends pretty late. We had to wake up early this morning to get a couple things done, and we spent a lot of time on our feet before we finally got some lunch. And you see how these things start to add up. And you put the puzzle pieces together, and it doesn't take, a really high medical degree to start to see the accumulative effect of all these seemingly insignificant factors. So if your zebra's horizontal, once again, dial back into that algorithm. From that previous slide, I talked about resetting the system. What can you do? All right, you feel like the day's lost. Zebra sideways, you're down. What are we going to do to get you back up? If not today, then by the next day. Now, if you're listening to this lecture, I almost guarantee you have a pretty good amount of trust in the zebra that you're trying to help out, just because it takes a lot to try and really want to help somebody at a level that's beyond yourself, that you're truly selfless. And if you have trust in any loving relationship, I think it really starts with respect, and having respect for the individual and what they're going through and how hard it must be. There's the walk a mile in their shoes, what that must feel like. But any type of imagery or imagining that, I think doesn't do it justice, because I don't think we really can ever know. Being a non-zebra in a household with 3 other zebras, I don't legitimately know what they're going through. When my daughter randomly, as a almost 8-year-old, starts to break down about something insignificant, and this is not related to her being a prepubescent 8-year-old, right, that thinks she's 18, but pain factors that get way blown out of proportion, is that I don't know what it's like to be her. And this is true for all humans, right? I think that building this trust, though, all starts with listening to facilitate understanding. So truly taking some of those tidbits and make sure the person hears you, that they know that you're receiving their voice, that you're holding space for them while they communicate with you at a pretty intimate level sometimes. I think far too often in the human, experience, we feel like we just want to be heard. And I think conversations are so loud these days because when somebody doesn't hear you, your first response is to speak louder, when I think it can be a lot more intimate and connected if we just are able to understand each other a bit more. Now, for those of you supporting zebras, a couple key notes here is that you're not there to fix someone. You're not there to fix your zebra. That ultimately comes down to their responsibility. Now, you are there as part of the solution or the algorithm. You're very much so a facilitator in that regard. But you cannot force change. You're not there to fix somebody. You're not there to tell them what to do. It needs to be within themselves. They need to be willing to take those steps. Sure, you can nudge gently along the way, but you cannot force change. In order to get them mentally to a place where they're ready to take these steps, you just have to be patient and by their side for months, sometimes for years, until they get to that place. Remember, I talked about earlier, that place of despair where it seems that they're at their wit's end. And that might be the time that they finally decide to take a step. And that's just the way it goes for everybody in the human race, not just our zebras, but we just need to be by their side and willing to help out when we're able to. All right, so to avoid getting bitten by your zebra, all right, I put this slide in kind of at the last moment when I alluded to Dr. Patty what I had been up to, and she chuckled and mentioned something about like not getting bitten. I said, you know what, that's a great slide to sneak in there. And once again, this comes from my point of view of being very self-critical and just carrying an unnecessary weight sometimes. So you need to understand that you are not perfect. And you won't always be able to predict your zebra's need for help. As best as you write that algorithm up and become at predicting situations, that life is going to get in the way and happen sometimes. And when it does, it's not your fault. I will say that again. It is not your fault. All right? To reinforce that, I don't want you to say sorry for life getting in the way. Remember, we need to empathize with our zebras. This really sucks. Yes, man, you must be going through a tough time. But we don't need to feel sorry for somebody. They know and they understand what they're going for. These zebras have dealt with this for far too long, and they don't need sympathy. They need empathy. They need to feel heard. They need to feel loved. What you can do is learn from every situation. So what? You handled something not so well. You got defensive. You started to question your zebra's symptoms or something going on. Come back to that place of love. Come back to that place of holding space for somebody that you care about, and learn from that situation and try not to repeat it in the future. And then lastly, you can avoid getting bitten by showing love through action and not just words. And this is something I've embraced in the past couple years of like, oh, I'm going to try and be better with that. That's great. That's all talk until you make it happen. But trying to find a way to support somebody, show them that you're going to support them. Actually support them. Do it. Don't just say you're going to do it. Step up. Now let's talk about you for a minute. You're going to need support. As a supporter, supporters need support. All right, I'll stop saying that word. But as the individual helping the zebra, how will you support yourself? Anecdotally, I can tell you the world of good things about Reiki. So Reiki is this Japanese technique that involves relaxation and healing and really blending what's gone on for thousands of years in other countries into our daily practice. You can go out and find a Reiki master and become level 1 certified. This gives you the ability to work on yourself, on your own energies. Now, if this seems a little bit woo-woo and off the deep end, I can assure you that coming from a medical field and really critiquing and carrying a whole lot of unnecessary bias going into anything, I'm a non-believer before I'm a believer. I'm a harsh non-believer. But Dr. Patty went out and got Reiki certified after she had a phenomenal experience in Reiki and just couldn't stop talking about it, which piqued my interest. And as she started working through some of these techniques with me, I realized how much I personally had to work through. And it's really opened the doors. It's allowed me to be more empathetic and open-minded. I can't say it's made me a better parent. It's made me a better human, which is the bigger umbrella over all these things, right? I put you down here, or I put down on this page for you, pardon me, the Reiki mantra, the 5 Reiki mantras that I try and live by each day. And they all start with on this day, because each day is a new day. It allows you to accept, regardless of what happens. Say you did get angry or you worried a lot the day before. It helps you reset and reground yourself. So it goes, on this day I will not worry. On this day I will not get angry. On this day I will do my work honestly. On this day I will be thankful for my many blessings. And on this day I will be kind to my neighbor and all living things. And if you go into each day truly accepting that and not just saying it, but making it part of your spiritual being, you'll really find it an easier time to navigate life. And remember, the better you're set up for your own health and wellness, the better you can therefore support people. And then surrounding yourself, as I mentioned earlier, with positive energy, with people that are into talking about spirituality and space and the universe and Reiki and quantum physics. All right, these are people that are really open and willing to connection, and connection's huge. I can't say enough about support for the support, other than finding community, finding support groups and attending them with your zebras. So if there's a zebra support group or forum or some type of channel, go with them. Don't just send them because that's their thing. Go and learn and speak and just be present. Hear, listen to other people. Don't be there to voice any opinion. You're simply being there in support, just your physical presence. So you have to understand that all of us have the capacity to improve our human experience. Everybody, zebra or non-zebra. And that if you can keep working on yourself, and you can marry this blend of you working on yourself with your zebra working on him or herself, you really open up a limitless door and journey pathway to wellness together. So avenues that you can explore, even if you're like, but Tom, I feel like I'm a pretty healthy person. There's always something that you can do that you can do together with your zebra to further that experience. It could be exercise. Can we find something to do together? Go for a simple walk, as I mentioned earlier, perhaps a hike. Can you get in nature? The Japanese have this term that translates into forest bathing. They've done studies where they've had people walk on a treadmill in a gym setting, have a seat on a couch and watch a virtual reality walk through a forest or sit in the forest. So those are the three variables. And they found so much benefit to mindset, to positivity with the group that was just sitting in the forest or watching the walk through the forest in comparison to the person that was walking in the gym setting. And it's just because of energy and things in nature, things around us. There's so much positivity that can be absorbed, at the cellular level in any of those modes. Could it be a journey into food or nutrition yourself? This path is certainly easier traveled with a companion. So if your zebra's looking into modifying that one or two things, go on that journey with them. Don't have them do it alone. We know it's easier to cook for two than it is to cook for one. Instead of cooking two individual meals, find a way to cook together. Be adventurous. Remember, this is a selfless act of love. This is not for you. This is for somebody else. And it couldn't be more meaningful than that. Mindset. What can you do for you that will help your zebra? Is it getting Reiki Level 1 certified to put you in a calmer state all the time? Is it getting into guided meditation to help bring your stress level down? Are you the constant or chronic worrier, and that some of that's rubbing off to your zebra? Is it lifestyle? Are you going out a lot? Or sleep? Do we need to adjust schedules to promote health? Is somebody the night owl? Somebody is the, get up early and get things going? Do we need to figure out a ways around, constantly clashing schedules, like being able to go in and, all right, well, I'll go in and read for a little bit while you fall asleep, or I'll go and tuck you in. It seems ridiculous, but these are conversations that we need to have. And then stress modulation. Can we do this through non-alcoholic means? Is your zebra really fighting to find a lower level of stress in their lives, and you enjoy having, a good number of beers each week to help dial things down? Well, can you do that through non-alcoholic means, whether it's meditation, whether it's finding support via a group, whether it's just being able to talk and communicate about what's stressing you out? There are so many different avenues to explore and roads to go down, especially with your zebra. That'd be so key. And then to summarize, you want to do what you can when you can. Remember, baby steps aren't always manageable. Sometimes we'll need to crawl, and starting with crawling is completely fine. We want progress to be slow. We want to do as much as we can, but it's got to be within a tolerable means to the system. We need to be adaptable. We need to be able to change on the fly. We need to be able to help our zebras out with whatever they need. We might have the best action plan in place and it completely flops, and we'll need to be willing and ready to change. We need to be open to new ideas. Our zebras are notorious for researching things on their own. They might come back with, guided meditation is going to save me, and you need the first thought, the words that come out of your mouth, and those first thoughts need to be of support and positivity. I know so many people that go to their significant others, their spouses, with an idea about something, and before met with any excitement, it's, well, what if this? What if that? It's going straight to the negative first. We need to be straight to the positive and to the open-mindedness to have those discussions. And then, as supporters of our zebras that we love so much, we need to be self-loving. The common phrase when you hop on the airplane, right, is, please place the oxygen mask over your own face before helping others. So how are you going to help somebody if you can't help yourself? If you feel like you have no sense of self-worth, no sense of self-love, no direction that you're moving, how will you best help somebody else? It's going to be very difficult. So we need to find a way to work on ourselves as well. And that wraps things up here. Once again, I am by no means a relationship expert or a professional at communication, but having worked in this field and with this population and being married and a significant part of a zebra's life for a long time, and now having a family of zebras, I feel like I have a pretty good starting point to offer some initial advice or some initial thoughts on this topic of supporting our zebras. For more information on connecting with us, you can find us via email at info@elevationwellness.co. We're on Facebook, just as Elevation Wellness, and then on Instagram under the handle elevation_wellness_co. Again, my name is Thomas Stott. I work alongside Dr. Patty at Elevation Wellness. You can find everything you need to know at our website, which is www.elevationwellness.co. Thank you so much for taking the time. Please send me comments, thoughts, feedback, and understand that I appreciate all of you. Thanks.